everybody. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Mangrove. And I took a kind of a break after the Charlie Kirk assassination. After I made that last video about Charlie Kirk. I was going through a lot of emotions. And I just needed to get my mind right. I needed to get my mind clear. I needed to pray. I needed to talk to God about it. And I needed to talk to some friends about it. And I just needed to reflect. I was going through a lot of weird emotions. I was mad. I was sad. Just a lot of weird emotions I was going through. And I just wanted to take some time and get over it. So the last video I made in the Bible study was Genesis 2, 1 through 3. So today we're going to continue on 4 through 9 in Genesis 2, 4 through 9. Before we get into the verse, I would like to say something about Genesis. Genesis is one of 66 books in the Bible. When people hear the word Genesis, they automatically jump right to creation. Oh, that's the book of creation. Is it? Is it the book of creation? Because there's only 2 chapters out of 50 that has anything to do with creation. Only 2 chapters out of 50. The other 48 chapters are God's relationships with the 4 generations of Adam and Eve. There's 48 chapters in Genesis of God's relationships with mankind. This tells me that God's relationships with mankind is more important than creation itself. God's relationships, the covenants that he made, the promises that he made with mankind, shows us how important his relationship is for us to him. Genesis is not a scientific textbook. Genesis is not a book of scientific explanations. It's not. It has nothing to do with science. It is a book on God's relationships with his children. Is exactly what it is. Now, welcome to God's documentary, in his own words, of what he did in Genesis 1, which is what Genesis 2 is. It's a documentary of what he did. I'll go ahead and read the verses and then we'll get into it. Genesis 2, verse 4 through 9. This is the history. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so that's Genesis 2, 4 through 9. What this is saying is that God created everything in Genesis 1. Now in Genesis 2, God has given us a visual, a historical documentary of what he created as he was creating it, on the day he created it. God is telling us what was going on and how it looked. And all this in God's own words. Now in Genesis 2:5, God says, before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb of the field was grown. For the Lord had not caused it to rain on the earth. There was no man to till the ground. But the mist came up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Okay, so, wow, no rain. There was no rain at all. Just a mist that came up from the ground and watered the entire ground. That's great. Some of you may not know this, but it did not rain on the earth for the next 1,650 years after Adam and Eve were created. It did not rain for the next 1,650 years. It did not rain until the flood, until after Noah built the ark. That is the first time it ever rained on the earth. That's the truth. You know, I think about that. It must have been terrible, like terrible, to have been like a weatherman back then, right? And the forecast for tomorrow is sunshine. And the forecast for the next whole week is sunshine. I don't even know why I even have a job. It's just sunshine all the time. That's what it was. And then Genesis 2:7, the big day, day 6 of creation. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. I want to be perfectly clear on this. Okay? Everything in Genesis 2, 1 through 25, is what was happening day by day in Genesis 1, 1 through 29. During the creation, on the day that God created it. Let me give you an example. In Genesis 1:11, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit. This is the third day of creation in Genesis 1. This is the same exact day as Genesis 2, verse 9. Out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of good and evil. So, on that third day, God also created the Garden of Eden. God created all vegetation on the earth on the third day. He made the mist come up from the ground and all the vegetation appeared on the third day. He used the mist of the ground to water everything that he created, and water everything that grew on the earth for the next 1650 years. That's what that mist was for. So in Genesis 2:7, and the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground, is the same day as Genesis, is the same day as day 6 in Genesis 1:26. God also created Eve on day 6, by the way. As stated in Genesis 1:27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. Both Adam and Eve were created on that day. Now, God rested on the seventh day, correct? On the seventh day of creation, God rested. In Genesis 2:1-25, God is clearly still creating. God only rested after he was done creating. When he had nothing left to create, that's when God rested. So on the seventh day, God rested after everything was created. Genesis 2, like I said, is just a visual of what God did in Genesis 1. He just explains it in more detail. It's his visual documentary, is exactly what it is. Gotta have coffee every now and then. I'm tired. I pulled a 13-and-a-half-hour shift yesterday, and I'm tired. And it's late. It's already late today. I just wanted to get it. I wanted to get a video out there. The reason why, one of the reasons why, I'm adamant about Genesis 2 and Genesis 1 being the exact same time frame as each other is because I just recently watched a video, a podcast, a very popular one, where they claim this to be different. They claim it to be where God created vegetation on the third day, but the Garden of Eden was created later, after God rested. After God rested, he created the Garden of Eden. We all know that God did not rest until creation was over. When he was done creating everything, he rested. God created all vegetation on the third day, including the Garden of Eden. God created Adam and Eve on the same day, day 6. All Genesis 2 is letting you know what God did and how he did it, and he's giving you a artist's depiction of so you can visualize what it looked like back then. That's what it is. So that's it for this video, and the next video is going to be actually going to be Genesis 2:10, about the rivers in Eden. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I think it's very important. And thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Like and subscribe. Have a blessed day. Bye.